congressional Republicans. Let's take a look right now on the House floor. As you'll see, members are there. They've been shaking hands, hugs. There's been a few slaps in the shoulder. They are getting ready for the big show. Many women lawmakers are dressed in white for this moment. Don't forget, reproductive rights are going to be a major element of President Biden's speech. And we see on the rostrum Speaker Johnson and Vice President Kamala Harris as they wait for President Biden to come. Now, President Biden is going to bring a major focus to this speech about the U.S. economy. According to excerpts released by the White House, Biden will say this is the greatest story never told to many Americans. Why is that? Well, Biden's going to say that under his presidency, he's added roughly 15 million jobs. That's a record for any president. Many Republicans will push back against that, saying those jobs were naturally going to come back as the economy recovered from the pandemic. Secondly, is going to point out the unemployment rate at 3.7%. That's a serious drop since when he took office. And he's also going to discuss inflation. Now, inflation is down at about 3.1%. It had peaked at 9.1% in the summer of 2022. And that really hurt the president's approval rating. And he still knows that Americans are struggling with the cost of housing and groceries. And we see in these numbers that many Americans are not satisfied by his economic leadership. Just 34% approve. So tonight is the opportunity for the president to try to bring the country over to his side, to see things his way, as he believes the country is faring. It is a chance for him in an election year to go after his likely competitor in this year's election, Republican Donald Trump, the former president, a possible rematch of the 2020 election. Now, according to aides, Biden is not going to say Trump's name. He's going to talk about his predecessor. He's going to talk about someone else who is similarly his age. Biden is 81, Trump is 77. He wants to draw that contrast on what it means to govern responsibly, on what it means to have a sense of optimism about where the country is and where it could go. This is his chance to try to define Trump and reintroduce Trump's administration to voters. Now, Republicans will then be able to follow with Alabama Senator Katie Britt delivering the GOP response. According to excerpts from her, she's going to make inflation a major focus and just say that families are not earning enough to get by in an era of higher prices. Biden spent a lot of time working on this speech. He huddled with aides at Camp David, trying to figure out what the perfect tone would be, trying to show both his compassion and his drive. Aides are saying tonight will be a moment of high energy for the president because he needs to be able to convince the country that he deserves another 4 years. The event itself is one of tremendous spectacle. Historically, State of the Unions were nothing big. Many presidents just delivered them in paper form, submitting it to Congress to be read. That began to change around 1923 when the first State of the Union was given as a radio address by Calvin Coolidge. By 1947, it expanded to TV with Harry Truman. And what we see now is a State of the Union address in which many people will be watching it over the internet, and not necessarily the entirety of it. They'll see it in clips, in bits, in memes. And that's why one of the elements to watch for tonight is not just the totality of the speech, but the ability of President Biden to generate and create moments. What kind of moments could we see? Well, in last year's State of the Union address, President Biden specifically challenged Republicans to not cut Social Security or Medicare benefits. When he suggested they would, they began to boo him, and he got them in an impromptu moment to agree to protect both programs and then get a standing ovation, something that's very rare in these highly polarized times. If we go back and look at what's going on right now at the House chamber, we can see that lawmakers are starting to stare at their phones. They're looking for updates as they wait for the president to arrive. This is a moment that is being built with anticipation and anticipation and anticipation. One thing to look for tonight is also to see which applause lines resonate the most. The president, according to his aides, is really trying to frame this as a question of who is on your side, who's fighting for you, the middle class, union workers, senior citizens, children, and especially women. If you look at the guests tonight, many of them are involved in the reproductive rights issue, whether that's IVF or abortion. And this is an intentional strategy by the White House because they've said they want to resume the protections in Roe versus Wade. As many people know, the Supreme Court in 2022 overturned Roe versus Wade, allowing states to set their own course on what abortion should be and could be. President Biden sees this not only as an issue of fundamental rights, but politically a way for him to galvanize voters. Republicans are going to have to find ways to push back against him on this. And one thing we might look for is when there are moments for cooperation and when there are moments of major disputes. Right now, President Biden has been unable to provide roughly $60 billion in aid to Ukraine, as House Republicans have rejected measures that have passed the Senate. Why does this matter? Ukraine is running low on munitions without that aid. Estimates are that Russia basically has the equivalent of 5 bullets for every one that Ukraine has. As the National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said, right now Ukrainian troops aren't at a loss for courage, they're at a loss for weapons. And that's why this measure really matters if the United States is going to be willing to confront Russia in Ukraine. It is also a chance for the United States to show its partnership with the European Union and NATO. In the audience tonight for the president's speech is the Prime Minister of Sweden. Sweden just joined NATO as a member. Putin's invasion of the Ukraine caused countries like Sweden. Oh, and we can see Jill Biden is entering right now. That's the First Lady, to applause. She's seated next to the Prime Minister of Sweden, who's there. Sweden and Finland have both are in the process of joining NATO. NATO has expanded because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and Biden sees it as being stronger than ever, as well as the United States' relationships with other countries, both in the EU as well as in Asia.
Mr. Speaker, the President's Cabinet.
The chamber is now waiting for the President's arrival. And we see members of his cabinet coming. That's Secretary of State Antony Blinken out first. He's followed by Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen. Behind them is Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, and then Attorney General Merrick Garland. Some of you might remember that Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin recently had surgery for cancer, but did not inform the White House of that, something that caused tremendous consternation with members of Congress. But we're not seeing any residual frustration or anger as he walked down the aisle tonight. More cabinet members are making their way down. And once again, we're seeing warm greetings, particularly from the Democratic side. This is a chance for Democrats, which happen to have a very large and broad base, but a very diverse base that it sometimes finds differences with each other. This is a chance for them to come together. And that's what they're trying to do tonight. We see Pete Buttigieg, the Transportation Secretary, and Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm coming down as well. Buttigieg, of course, ran for president against Biden in 2020 and managed to win the Iowa caucuses. And then behind Granholm is someone very important. That is Alejandro Mayorkas, the Secretary of DHS. He was recently the subject of an impeachment effort by the House. The House took 2 efforts in order to impeach him, and that means Mayorkas' trial could go before the Senate. Behind Mayorkas is the White House Chief of Staff, Jeff Zients. Zients has been building up expectations for tonight, saying that Biden is going to come out with a sense of passion. Near Zients is the Veterans Affairs Secretary, Dennis McDonough, who had been the Chief of Staff during Barack Obama's presidency. Getting hugs in the middle of the screen is OMB Director Shalanda Yun. Shalanda Yun is one of those math gurus inside the White House who happened to negotiate this past summer how to raise the debt ceiling, all while taking care of her daughter in daycare. She is going to be on the hot seat in the next week as the White House launches its budget proposal and continues to negotiate with Congress over issues like funding. We're still waiting for several cabinet members to find their seats. This is a slow and gradual process that, as is often the case when the president speaks, is not necessarily running on schedule, because this is a moment, almost like a reunion of glad handing, a chance to just say hi and wish each other well. Out at the far left on the screen, you can see West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin. Manchin has been one of the major players during Biden's tenure. He's not running for re-election because West Virginia has increasingly turned Republican. But it was Manchin who helped put together deals like the Inflation Reduction Act, which allowed for investment in renewable energy and might be one of the major subjects that Biden will bring up tonight. He's blocked on screen ever so slightly, but there is Utah Senator Mitt Romney, who was just talking to Manchin. Romney is also not seeking re-election. And the fact that so many people are leaving Congress who are thought of as being able to work together in a bipartisan sense tells you a lot about the frustration that many lawmakers feel and how challenging it could be for anyone to bring a country this politically polarized together and find the incentives to do so. Members are still speaking and waiting to get to their seats as we await President Biden's arrival. Last year when Biden spoke, the speech went about an hour and 13 minutes. Many State of the Union addresses tend to run an hour, give or take 10 or 15 minutes. President Bill Clinton has the longest delivered State of the Union speech on record, although Jimmy Carter in 1981 delivered a State of the Union that was more than 30,000 words, but since he'd recently lost the election, he didn't bother to speak. He just submitted it in paper form to Congress.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
And here comes President Biden. You can see him getting a lot of applause from Democrats in the chamber. Speaker Johnson is also standing up there and applauding for the president as he very slowly makes his way down the aisle as he greets members. This is a really comfortable space for President Biden. He came to the Senate from Delaware in 1972. He spent most of his adult life in the US Capitol as a senator for Delaware. He thinks of himself often in those terms still to this day when he thinks about what his policies mean for constituents. He even reads local Delaware newspapers and sends letters and congratulatory notes to people he reads about. And so again, this is a man at home in the US Capitol who's made plenty of speeches here. In fact, back in 1983, when he was a senator, he delivered the Democratic response to Ronald Reagan's State of the Union. It was a very unique response in that Biden did so without his suit jacket on and standing up in his office. He had his aides working behind him as he spoke, and he literally did a walk and talk like what you would see in the TV show The West Wing decades later. And his big point was very similar to what he might talk about tonight, that he needed an economy with opportunity and fairness for workers. And in doing that, he channeled the Great Depression era President Franklin D. Roosevelt, saying, quote, "It can be done." Tonight is a chance for him to prove that that's still possible. You see Biden is still greeting more lawmakers. Behind him is Chuck Schumer, the New York senator and the Democratic leader in the Senate. Biden is going in for hugs and kisses. Again, he is with Democrats who know that he is their choice in 2024. Biden has faced little opposition in the Democratic primaries, despite concerns about his 81 years from voters. Right in front of Biden right now is Republican Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia, who's holding up her phone and appears to be saying something to him while wearing a Make America Great Again hat and what appears to be a t-shirt supportive of former Republican President Donald Trump. And we can see that Biden is posing for more selfies. He's become something of a selfie aficionado when he's out on the road. That's become one of his major ways of interacting with supporters at speeches and rallies once COVID restrictions lifted. Sometimes after remarks, he can take 20, 30, even 40 minutes with people just getting those selfies. And there's Biden with Manchin, the West Virginia senator, and Mitt Romney, the 2012 Republican nominee for president, who will be leaving the Senate for Utah. President is taking this moment, even taking hold of other people's phones just to get the shot right. Not many people have had a chance to see the president work his own iPhone, but I have. He has his photos neatly organized of his family. Is remarkably adept at a touch screen. Now he's greeting members of the Supreme Court. That's Justice SOTU. Next to her is Justice Elena Kagan. He's saying hi to Justice Neil Gorsuch and Justice Brett Kavanaugh. Biden, of course, during his time in the Senate, was for a period, the chairs of the Senate Judiciary Committee, which gets to deal with the confirmation process for nominations to the Supreme Court. Now he's talking to his military advisors. Again, Biden is taking his time. This is his chance to show how presidential he can be. You can see him right now. He just greeted Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, who he ran against in the 2020 Democratic primary contest. Next to Sanders is Georgia Senator Raphael Warnock. And with that, he's coming to the roster.
Tony. Here's a Jill. Good evening. Good evening. If I were smart, I'd go home now. Mr. Speaker, Madam Vice President, members of Congress, my fellow Americans, in January 1941, Franklin Roosevelt came to this chamber to speak to the nation, and he said, "I address you at a moment unprecedented in the history of the Union. Hitler was on the march. War was raging in Europe. President Roosevelt's purpose was to wake up Congress and alert the American people that this was no ordinary time. Freedom and democracy were under assault in the world. Tonight, I come to this same chamber to address the nation. Now, it's we who face an unprecedented moment in the history of the Union. And yes, my purpose tonight is to wake up the Congress and alert the American people that this is no ordinary moment either. Not since President Lincoln and the Civil War have freedom and democracy been under assault at home as they are today. What makes our moment rare is that freedom and democracy are under attack both at home and overseas at the very same time. Overseas, Putin of Russia is on the march, invading Ukraine and sowing chaos throughout Europe and beyond. If anybody in this room thinks Putin will stop at Ukraine, I assure you he will not. But Ukraine can stop Putin. Ukraine can stop Putin if we stand with Ukraine and provide the weapons that it needs to defend itself. That is all. That is all Ukraine is asking. They're not asking for American soldiers. In fact, there are no American soldiers at war in Ukraine, and I'm determined to keep it that way. But now, assistance to Ukraine is being blocked by those who want to walk away from our world leadership. It wasn't long ago when a Republican president named Ronald Reagan thundered, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." Now, my predecessor, a former Republican president, tells Putin, quote, "Do whatever the hell you want." That's a quote. A former president actually said that, bowing down to a Russian leader. I think it's outrageous, it's dangerous, and it's unacceptable. America is a founding member of NATO, the military alliance of democratic nations created after World War II to prevent war and keep the peace. And today, we've made NATO stronger than ever. We welcomed Finland to the alliance last year. And just this morning, Sweden officially joined, and their minister is here tonight. We're going to stand up. Welcome. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And they know how to fight. Mr. Prime Minister, welcome to NATO, the strongest military alliance the world has ever seen. I say this to Congress, we have to stand up to Putin. Send me a bipartisan national security bill. History is literally watching. History is watching. If the United States walks away, it will put Ukraine at risk. Europe is at risk. The free world will be at risk, emboldening others to do what they wish to do us harm. My message to President Putin, who I've known for a long time, is simple. We will not walk away. We will not bow down. I will not bow down. In a literal sense, history is watching. History is watching. Just like history watched 3 years ago on January 6th, when insurrectionists stormed this very Capitol and placed a dagger to the throat of American democracy. Many of you are here on that darkest of days. We all saw with our own eyes the insurrectionists were not patriots. They'd come to stop the peaceful transfer of power, to overturn the will of the people. January 6th lies about the 2020 election and the plots to steal the election posed a gravest threat to U.S. democracy since the Civil War. But they failed. America stood. America America stood strong and democracy prevailed. We must be honest. The threat to democracy must be defended. My predecessor and some of you here seek to bury the truth about January 6th. I will not do that. This is the moment to speak the truth and to bury the lies. Here's the simple truth. You can't love your country only when you win. As I've done ever since being elected to office, I ask all of you without regard to party to join together and defend democracy. Remember your oath of office is defending against all threats, foreign and domestic. Respect free and fair elections, restore trust in our institutions, and make clear political violence has absolutely no place in America, zero place. Again, it's not hyperbole to suggest history is watching. We're watching. Your children and grandchildren will read about this day and what we do. History is watching another assault on freedom. Joining us tonight is Latoya Beasley, a social worker from Birmingham, Alabama. 14 months ago, she and her husband welcomed a baby girl thanks to the miracle of IVF. She scheduled treatments to have that second child. But the Alabama Supreme Court shut down IVF treatments across the state, unleashed by a Supreme Court decision overturning Roe v. Wade. She was told her dream would have to wait. What her family had got through should never have happened. Unless Congress acts, it could happen again. So tonight, let's stand up for families like hers. To my friends across the aisle, don't keep this waiting any longer. Guarantee the right to AVF. Guarantee it nationwide. Like most Americans, I believe Roe v. Wade got it right. I thank Vice President Harris for being an incredible leader, defending reproductive freedom, and so much more. Thank you. My predecessor came to office determined to see Roe v. Wade overturned. He's the reason it was overturned, and he brags about it. Look at the chaos that has resulted. Joining us tonight is Kate Cox, the wife and mother from Dallas. She's become pregnant again and had a fetus of a fatal condition. Her doctor told Kate that her own life and her ability to have children in the future were at risk if she didn't act. Because Texas law banned her ability to act, Kate and her husband had to leave the state to get what she needed. What her family got through should have never happened as well, but it's happening in too many others. There are state laws banning the freedom to choose, criminalizing doctors, forcing survivors of rape and incest to leave their states to get the treatment they need. Many of you in this chamber and my predecessor are promising to pass a national ban on reproductive freedom. My God, what freedom else would you take away? Look, it's a decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. The Supreme Court majority wrote the following, and with all due respect, justices, women are not without electoral power. Electoral or political power. You're about to realize just how much you're right about that. Clearly, those bragging about overturning Roe v. Wade have no clue about the power of women. But they found out when reproductive freedom was on the ballot. We won in 2022 and 2020, and we'll win again in 2024. If you If you, the American people, send me a Congress that supports the right to choose, I promise you, I'll restore Roe v. Wade as the law of the land again. Folks, America cannot go back. I'm here tonight to show what I believe is the way forward, because I know how far we come. 4 years ago next week, before I came to office, the country was hit by the worst pandemic and the worst economic crisis in a century. Remember the fear, record losses? Remember the spikes in crime and the murder rate, raging virus that took more than 1 million American lives, of loved ones, millions left behind? A mental health crisis of isolation and loneliness. A president, my predecessor, failed the most basic presidential duty that he owes to American people, the duty to care. I think that's unforgivable. I came to office determined to get us through one of the toughest periods in the nation's history. We have. It doesn't make news in 1,000 cities and towns. The American people are writing the greatest comeback story never told. So let's tell the story here. Tell it here and now. America's comeback is building the future of American possibilities, building an economy from the middle out and the bottom up, not the top down, investing in all America, in all Americans, to make sure everyone has a fair shot. We leave no one behind. The pandemic no longer controls our lives. The vaccines that saved us from COVID are now being used to beat cancer, turning setback into comeback. That's what America does. That's what America does. Folks, my inherited economy is on the brink. Now our economy is literally the envy of the world. 15 million new jobs in just 3 years, a record, a record. Unemployment at 50-year lows. A record 16 million Americans are starting small businesses, and each one is a literal act of hope. With historic job growth and small business growth for Black and Hispanics and Asian Americans, 800,000 new manufacturing jobs in America and counting. Where is it written we can't be the manufacturing capital of the world? We are, we will. More people have health insurance today. More people have health insurance today than ever before. The racial wealth gap is as small as it's been in 20 years. Wages keep going up, inflation keeps coming down. Inflation has dropped from 9% to 3%, the lowest in the world and tending lower. The landing is and will be soft. And now, instead of importing foreign products and exporting American jobs, we're exporting American products and creating American jobs. Right here in America, where they belong. And it takes time, but the American people are beginning to feel it. Consumer studies show consumer confidence is soaring. Buy America has been the law of the land since the 1930s. Past administrations, including my predecessor, including some Democrats as well in the past, failed to buy American. Not anymore. On my watch, federal projects that you fund, like helping build American roads, bridges, and highways, will be made with American products and built by American workers. Creating good-paying American jobs. And thanks to our CHIPS and Science Act, the United States is investing more in research and development than ever before. During the pandemic, a shortage of semiconductors, chips, that drove up the price of everything from cell phones to automobiles. And by the way, we invented those chips right here in America. Well, instead of having to import them, private companies are now investing billions of dollars to build new chip factories here in America. creating tens of thousands of jobs. Many of those jobs paying $100,000 a year and don't require a college degree. In fact, my policies have attracted $650 billion in private sector investment in clean energy, advanced manufacturing, creating tens of thousands of jobs here in America. And thanks to our bipartisan infrastructure law, 46,000 new projects have been announced all across your communities. And by the way, I noticed some of you strongly voted against it, or they're cheering on that money coming in. I like it. I'm with you. I'm with you. And if any of you don't want that money in your district, just let me know. Modernizing our roads and bridges, ports and airports, public transit systems. Removing poisonous lead pipes so every child can drink clean water without risk of brain damage. Providing affordable high-speed internet for every American, no matter where you live, urban, suburban, or rural communities in red states and blue states. Record investments in tribal communities. Because of my investment in family farms, because I invested in family farms led by my Secretary of Agriculture, who knows more about this than anybody I know, we're better able to stay in the family for those farms and their children and grandchildren won't have to leave home to make a living. It's transformative. The great comeback story is Belvedere, Illinois, home to an auto plant for nearly 60 years. Before I came to office, the plant was on its way to shutting down. Thousands of workers feared for their livelihoods. Hope was fading. Then I was elected to office and we raised the Belvedere repeatedly with auto companies knowing unions would make all the difference. The UAW worked like hell to keep the plant open and get these jobs back, and together we succeeded. Instead of auto factories shutting down, auto factories reopening, a new state-of-the-art battery factories being built to power those cars there at the same. The folks of Belvedere, I say, instead of your town being left behind, your community is moving forward again. Because instead of watching auto jobs of the future go overseas, 4,000 union jobs with higher wages are building the future in Belvedere right here in America. Here tonight is UAW President Shawn Fain, a great friend and a great labor leader. Shawn, where are you? Stand up. And Dawn Sims, a third-generation worker, UAW worker at Belvedere. Shawn, I was proud to be the first president to stand on the picket line, and today, Dawn has a good job in her hometown, providing stability for her family and pride and dignity as well. Showing once again, Wall Street didn't build America. They're not bad guys. They didn't build it, though. The middle class built the country, and unions built the middle class. I say to the American people, when America gets knocked down, we get back up. We keep going. That's America. That's you, the American people. It's because of you America's coming back. It's because of you our future is bright. It's because of you that tonight we can proudly say the state of our union is strong and getting stronger. Tonight, I want to talk about the future of possibilities that we can build together. A future where the days of trickle-down economics are over and the wealthy and the biggest corporations no longer get all the tax breaks. And by the way, I understand corporations. I come from a state that has more corporations invested than every one of your states in the United States combined. And I represented it for 36 years. I'm not anti-corporation, but I grew up in a home where trickle-down economics didn't put much on my dad's kitchen table. That's why I determined to turn things around so middle class does well. When they do well, the poor go way up and the wealthy still do very well. We all do well. And there's more to do to make sure you're feeling the benefits of all we're doing. Americans pay more for prescription drugs than anywhere in the world. It's wrong, and I'm ending it. For the law that I proposed and signed, not one of you Republican buddies voted for it. We finally beat Big Pharma. Instead of paying $400 a month or thereabouts for insulin with diabetes, and it only costs $10 to make, they only get paid $35 a month now and still make a healthy profit. And I want to, but what to do next? I want to cap the cost of insulin at $35 a month for every American who needs it. Everyone. For years, people have talked about it, but finally we got it done and gave Medicare the power to negotiate lower prices on prescription drugs, just like the VA is able to do for veterans. That's not just saving seniors money, it's saving taxpayers money. We cut the federal deficit by $160 billion. Because Medicare will no longer have to pay those exorbitant prices to Big Pharma. This year, Medicare is negotiating lower prices for some of the costliest drugs on the market that treat everything from heart disease to arthritis. It's now time to go further and give Medicare the power to negotiate lower prices for 500 different drugs over the next decade. They're making a lot of money, guys. And they'll still be extremely profitable. They'll not only save lives, it will save taxpayers another $200 billion. Starting next year, the same law caps total prescription drug costs for seniors on Medicare at $2,000 a year, even for expensive cancer drugs that cost $10,000, $12,000, $15,000. I want to cap prescription drug costs at $2,000 a year for everyone. Folks, I'm going to get in trouble for saying that, but if you want to get an Air Force One and fly to Toronto, Berlin, Moscow, well, even Moscow, probably. And bring your prescription with you, and I promise you I'll get it for you for 40% the cost you're paying now. Same company, same drug, same place. Folks, the Affordable Care Act, the old Obamacare, is still a very big deal. Over 100 million of you can no longer be denied health insurance because of pre-existing condition. But my predecessor, and many in this chamber, want to take this prescription drug away by repealing Affordable Care Act. I'm not going to let that happen. We stopped you 50 times before, and we'll stop you again. In fact, I'm not only protecting it, I'm expanding it. They enacted tax credits of $800 per person per year, reduce health care costs for millions of working families. That tax credit expires next year. I want to make that savings permanent. To state the obvious, women are more than half our population, but research on women's health has always been underfunded. That's why we're launching the first ever White House initiative on women's health research, led by Jill, doing an incredible job as First Lady. To pass my plan for $12 billion to transfer women's health research and benefit millions of lives all across America. I know the cost of housing is so important to you. If inflation keeps coming down, mortgage rates will come down as well, and the Fed acknowledges that. But I'm not waiting. I want to provide an annual tax credit that will give Americans $400 a month for the next 2 years as mortgage rates come down, to put toward their mortgages when they buy their first home or trade up for a little more space. Just for 2 years. And my administration is also eliminating title insurance on federally backed mortgages. When you refinance your home, you can save $1,000 or more as a consequence. For millions of renters, we're cracking down on big landlords who use antitrust law, who break antitrust laws by price fixing and driving up rents. We've cut red tape so builders can get federally financing, which is already helping build a record 1.7 million new housing units nationwide. Now pass and build and renovate 2 million affordable homes and bring those rents down. To remain the strongest economy in the world, we need to have the best education system in the world. And I suspect all of you, want to give every child, a good start by providing access to preschool for 3 and 4 years old. You know, I think I pointed out last year, that children coming from broken homes where there's no books, they're not read to, not spoken to very often, start school, kindergarten or first grade, having heard 1 million fewer words spoken. Well, studies show that children who go to preschool are nearly 50% more likely to finish high school, go on to earn a 2- and 4-year degree, no matter what their background is. I met a year and a half ago with the leaders of the Business Roundtable. They were mad that they were angry. I think, well, they were discussing why I wanted to spend money on education. I pointed out to them as vice president, I met with over 182 of those folks. Don't hold me to the exact number. And I asked them what they need most, the CEOs. And you've had the same experience on both sides of the aisle. They say a better educated workforce, right? So I looked at them and I say, I come from Delaware. DuPont used to be the 8th largest corporation in the world. And every new enterprise they bought, they educated the workforce to that enterprise. But none of you do that anymore. Why are you angry with me providing you the opportunity for the best educated workforce in the world? And they all looked at me and said, I think you're right. I want to expand high-quality tutoring and summer learning to see that every child learns to read by 3rd grade. I'm also connecting local businesses and high schools so students get hands-on experience and a path to good-paying job, whether or not they go to college. And I want to make sure the college is more affordable. Let's continue increasing the Pell Grants to working and middle-class families and increase record investments in HBCUs and minority-serving institutions, including Hispanic institutions. When I was told I couldn't universally just change the way in which we dealt with student loans, I fixed 2 student loan programs that already existed to reduce the burden of student debt for nearly 4 million Americans, including nurses, firefighters, and others in public service. Like Keenan Jones, a public educator from Minnesota, who's here with us tonight. Keenan, where are you? Keenan, thank you. He's educated hundreds of students so they can go to college. Now he's able to help, after debt forgiveness, get his own daughter to college. And folks, look, such relief is good for the economy because folks are now able to buy a home, start a business, start a family. While we're at it, I want to give public school teachers a raise. And by the way, the first couple of years, we cut the deficit. Now, let me speak to the question of fundamental fairness for all Americans. I've been delivering real results in fiscally responsible ways. We've already cut the federal deficit. We've already cut the federal deficit over $1 trillion. I signed the bipartisan deal to cut another $1 trillion in the next decade. It's my goal to cut the federal deficit another $3 trillion by making big corporations and very wealthy finally beginning to pay their fair share. Look, I'm a capitalist. If you want to make or can make $1 million or millions of bucks, that's great. Just pay your fair share in taxes. A fair tax code is how we invest things that make this country great. Healthcare, education, defense, and so much more. But here's the deal. The last administration enacted a $2 trillion tax cut, overwhelmingly benefit the top 1%, the very wealthy and the biggest corporations, and exploded the federal deficit. They added more to the national debt than any presidential term in American history. Check the numbers. Folks at home, does anybody really think the tax code is fair? Do you really think the wealthy and big corporations need another $2 trillion tax break? I sure don't. I'm going to keep fighting like hell to make it fair. Under my plan, nobody earning less than $400,000 a year will pay an additional penny in federal taxes. Nobody, not one penny. And they haven't yet. In fact, the child tax credit I passed during the pandemic cut taxes for millions of working families and cut child poverty in half. Restore that child tax credit. No child should go hungry in this country. The way to make the tax code fair is to make big corporations and the very wealthy begin to pay their fair share. Remember in 2020, 55 of the biggest companies in America made $40 billion and paid zero in federal income tax. Zero. Not anymore. Thanks to the law I wrote and we signed, big companies have to pay a minimum of 15%. But that's still less than working people pay in federal taxes. It's time to raise corporate minimum tax to at least 21%. So every big corporation finally begins to pay their fair share. I also want to end tax breaks for big pharma, big oil, private jets, massive executive pay when it's only supposed to be $1 million that can be deducted. They can pay them $20 million if they want, but deduct $1 million. End it now. You know, there are 1,000 billionaires in America. You know what the average federal tax is for those billionaires? No. They're making great sacrifices, 8.2%. That's far less than the vast majority of Americans pay. No billionaire should pay a lower federal tax rate than a teacher, a sanitation worker, or a nurse. I propose a minimum tax for billionaires of 25%, just 25%. You know what that would raise? That would raise $500 billion over the next 10 years. And imagine what that could do for America. Imagine a future with affordable child care. Millions of families can get they need to go to work to help grow the economy. Imagine a future with paid leave, because no one should have to choose between working and taking care of their sick family member. Imagine a future of home care and elder care, and people living with disabilities so they can stay in their homes and family caregivers can finally get the pay they deserve. Tonight, let's all agree once again to stand up for seniors. Many of my friends on the other side of the aisle want to put Social Security on the chopping block. If anyone here tries to cut Social Security, Medicare, or raise the retirement age, I will stop you. The working people who built this country pay more into Social Security than millionaires and billionaires do. It's not fair. We have two ways to go. Republicans can cut Social Security and give more tax breaks to the wealthy. That's the proposal. Oh no, you guys don't want another $2 trillion tax cut? I kind of thought that's what your plan was. Well, that's good to hear. You're not going to cut another $2 trillion for the super wealthy. That's good to hear. I'll protect and strengthen Social Security and make the wealthy pay their fair share. Look, too many corporations raise prices to pad their profits, charging more and more for less and less. That's why we're cracking down on corporations that engage in price gouging and deceptive pricing, from food to healthcare to housing. In fact, the snack companies think you won't notice if they change the size of the bag and put a hell of a lot fewer, same size bag, put fewer chips in it. No, I'm not joking. It's called shrinkflation. Pass Bobby Casey's bill and stop this. I really mean it. You probably all saw that commercial on Snickers bars. You get charged the same amount, and you got about, I don't know, 10% fewer Snickers in it. Look, I'm also getting rid of junk fees, those hidden fees at the end of your bill that are there without your knowledge. My administration announced we're cutting credit card late fees from $32 to $8. Banks and credit card companies are allowed to charge what it costs them to instigate the collection. And that's more a hell of a lot like $8 and 30-some dollars. They don't like it. Credit card companies don't like it. But I'm saving American families $20 billion a year with all the junk fees I'm eliminating. Folks at home, that's why the banks are so mad. It's $20 billion in profit. I'm not stopping there. My administration has proposed rules to make cable, travel, utilities, and online ticket sellers tell you the total price up front so there are no surprises. It matters. It matters. And so does this. In November, my team began serious negotiation with a bipartisan group of senators. The result was a bipartisan bill with the toughest set of border security reforms we've ever seen. Oh, you don't think so? Oh, you don't like that bill, huh? That conservatives got together and said it was a good bill? I'll be darned. That's amazing. That bipartisan bill would hire 1,500 more security agents and officers, 100 more immigration judges to help tackle the backload of 2 million cases, 4,300 more asylum officers, and new policies so they can resolve cases in 6 months instead of 6 years now. What are you against? 100 more high-tech drug detection machines to significantly increase the ability to screen and stop vehicles smuggling fentanyl into America. That's killing thousands of children. This bill would save lives and bring order to the border. It will also give me and any new president new emergency authority to temporarily shut down the border when the number of migrants at the border is overwhelming. The Border Patrol Union has endorsed this bill. The Federal Chamber of Commerce is, yeah. You're saying low. Look at the facts. I know you know how to read. I believe that given the opportunity for a majority in the House and Senate would endorse the bill as well, a majority right now. But unfortunately, politics has derailed this bill so far. I'm told my predecessor called members of Congress in the Senate to demand they block the bill. He feels political win, he viewed it as a political win for me and a political loser for him. It's not about him, it's not about me. I'd be a winner, not really. Lincoln Riley, an innocent young woman who was killed by an illegal. That's right. But how many of thousands of people being killed by illegals? To her parents, I say, my heart goes out to you, having lost children myself. I understand. But look, if we change the dynamic at the border, people pay these smugglers $8,000 to get across the border because they know if they get by and let into the country, it's 6 to 8 years before they have a hearing. And it's worth it taking the chance of the $8,000. But if it's only 6 weeks, the idea is it's highly unlikely that people will pay that money and come all that way, knowing that they'll be able to be kicked out quickly. Folks, I would respectfully suggest my Republican friends owe it to the American people, get this bill done. We need to act now. And if my predecessor is watching, instead of paying politics and pressuring members of Congress to block the bill, join me in telling the Congress to pass it. We can do it together, but that's what here's what he will not do. I will not demonize immigrants saying they are poison in the blood of our country. I will not separate families. I will not ban people because of their faith. Unlike my predecessor on my first day in office, I introduced a comprehensive bill to fix our immigration system. Take a look at it. It has all these and more. Secure the border, provide a pathway to citizenship for dreamers, and so much more. But unlike my predecessor, I know who we are as Americans. We're the only nation in the world with a heart and soul that draws from old and new. Home to Native Americans, whose ancestors have been here for thousands of years. Home to people of from every place on earth. They came freely. Some came in chains. Some came when famine struck, like my ancestral family in Ireland. Some to flee persecution, to chase dreams that are impossible anywhere but here in America. That's America. And we all come from somewhere, but we're all Americans. Look, folks, we have a simple choice. We can fight about fixing the border, or we can fix it. I'm ready to fix it. Send me the border bill now. A transformational moment in history happened 59 years ago today in Selma, Alabama. Hundreds of foot soldiers for justice marched across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, named after the Grand Dragon of the Ku Klux Klan, to claim their fundamental right to vote. They were beaten, they were bloody, and left for dead. Our late friend and former colleague, John Lewis, was on that march. We miss him. But joining us tonight are other marchers, both in the gallery and on the floor, including Betty Mae Fikes, known as the voice of Selma. The daughter of gospel singers and preachers, she sang songs of prayer and protest on that bloody Sunday to help shake the nation's conscience. 5 months later, the Voting Rights Act passed and was signed into law. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. But 59 years later, there are forces taking us back in time. Voter suppression, election subversion, unlimited dark money, extreme gerrymandering. John Lewis is a great friend to many of us here, but if you truly want to honor him and all the heroes who marched with him, then it's time to do more than talk. Pass the Freedom to Vote Act, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. And stop denying another core value of America, our diversity across American life. Banning books, it's wrong. Instead of erasing history, let's make history. I want to protect fundamental rights. Pass the Equality Act. And my message to transgender Americans, I have your back. Pass the PRO Act for workers' rights. Raise the federal minimum wage, because every worker has a right to a decent living more than $7 an hour. We're also making history by confronting the climate crisis, not denying it. I don't think any of you think there's no longer a climate crisis. At least I hope you don't. I'm taking the most significant action ever on climate in the history of the world. I'm cutting our carbon emissions in half by 2030, creating tens of thousands of clean energy jobs, like the IBEW work is building and installing 500,000 electric vehicle charging stations. Conserving 30% of America's lands and waters by 2030. And taking action on environmental justice fence line communities smothered by the legacy of pollution. And pattern after the Peace Corps and AmeriCorps, I launched the Climate Corps to put 20,000 young people to work in the forefront of our clean energy future. I'll triple that number in a decade. To state the obvious, all Americans deserve the freedom to be safe. And America is safer today than when I took office. Year before I took office, murder rates went up 30%. 30% they went up. The biggest increase in history. It was then, through my American Rescue Plan, which every American voted against, I might add, we made the largest investment in public safety ever. Last year, the murder rate saw the sharpest decrease in history. Violent crime fell to one of its lowest levels in more than 50 years. but we have more to do. We have to help cities invest in more community police officers, more mental health workers, more community violence intervention. Give communities the tool to crack down on gun crime, retail crime, and carjacking. Keep building trust, as I've been doing by taking executive action on police reform and calling for it to be the law of the land. Directing my cabinet to review the federal classification of marijuana and expunging thousands of convictions for the mere possession, because no one should be jailed for simply using or have it on their record. Take on crimes of domestic violence. I'm ramping up the federal enforcement of the Violence Against Women Act that I proudly wrote when I was a senator, so we can finally end the scourge against women in America. There are other kinds of violence I want to stop. With us tonight is Jasmine, whose 9-year-old sister Jackie was murdered with 21 classmates and teachers in an elementary school in Uvalde, Texas. Very soon after that happened, Jill and I went to Uvalde for a couple of days. We spent hours and hours with each of the families. We heard their message, so everyone in this room, in this chamber, could hear the same message. The constant refrain, and I was there for hours meeting with every family. They said, do something. Do something. Well, I did do something by establishing the first ever Office of Gun Violence Prevention in the White House, that the Vice President is leading the charge. Thank you for doing it. Meanwhile, my predecessor told the NRA he's proud he did nothing on guns when he was president. Oh. After another shooting in Iowa recently, he said, when asked what to do about it, he said, just get over it. There's his quote, just get over it. I say, stop it. Stop it, stop it, stop it. I'm proud we beat the NRA when I signed the most significant gun safety law in nearly 30 years because of this Congress. We now must beat the NRA again. I'm demanding a ban on assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. Pass universal background checks. None of this. I taught the Second Amendment for 12 years. None of this violates the Second Amendment or vilifies responsible gun owners. You know, as we manage challenges at home, we're also managing crises abroad, including in the Middle East. I know the last 5 months have been gut-wrenching for so many people, for the Israeli people, for the Palestinian people, and so many here in America. This crisis began on October 7th with a massacre by a terrorist group called Hamas, as you all know. 1,200 innocent people, women and girls, men and boys, slaughtered after enduring sexual violence. The deadliest day for the Jewish people since the Holocaust, and 250 hostages taken. Here in this chamber tonight are families whose loved ones are still being held by Hamas. I pledge to all the families that we will not rest until we bring every one of your loved ones home. We also we will also work around the clock to bring home Evan and Paul, Americans being unjustly detained by the Russians and others around the world. Israel has the right to go after Hamas. Hamas ended this conflict by releasing hostages, laying down arms, could end it by releasing the hostages, laying down arms, and surrendering those responsible for October 7th. But Israel has Israel has an added burden because Hamas hides and operates among the civilian population like cowards, under hospitals, daycare centers, and all the like. Israel also has a fundamental responsibility, though, to protect innocent civilians in Gaza. This war has taken a greater toll on innocent civilians than all previous wars in Gaza combined. More than 30,000 Palestinians have been killed, most of whom are not Hamas. Thousands and thousands of innocent women and children, girls and boys, also orphaned. Nearly 2 million more Palestinians under bombardment or displacement. Homes destroyed, neighborhoods in rubble, cities in ruin. Families without food, water, medicine. It's heartbreaking. I've been working nonstop to establish an immediate ceasefire that would last for 6 weeks to get all the prisoners released, all the hostages released, to get the hostages home and ease the intolerable and humanitarian crisis and build toward an enduring, something more enduring. The United States has been leading international efforts to get more humanitarian assistance to Gaza. Tonight, I'm directing the U.S. military to lead an emergency mission to establish a temporary pier in the Mediterranean on the coast of Gaza that can receive large shipments carrying food, water, medicine, and temporary shelters. No U.S. boots will be on the ground. A temporary pier will enable a massive increase in the amount of humanitarian assistance getting into Gaza every day. And Israel must do its part. Israel must allow more aid into Gaza to ensure humanitarian workers aren't caught in the crossfire. And they're announcing they're going to have a crossing in northern Gaza. To the leadership of Israel, I say this: humanitarian assistance cannot be a secondary consideration or a bargaining chip. Protecting and saving innocent lives has to be a priority. As we look to the future, the only real solution to the situation is a two-state solution over time. And I say this as a lifelong supporter of Israel. My entire career, no one has a stronger record with Israel than I do. I challenge any of you here. I'm the only American president to visit Israel in wartime. But there is no other path that guarantees Israel's security and democracy. There is no other path that guarantees Palestinians can live in peace with peace and dignity. And there's no other path that guarantees peace between Israel and all of its neighbors, including Saudi Arabia, with whom I'm talking. Creating stability in the Middle East also means containing the threat posed by Iran. That's why I built a coalition of more than a dozen countries to defend international shipping and freedom of navigation in the Red Sea. I've ordered strikes to degrade the Houthi capability and defend U.S. forces in the region. As Commander-in-Chief, I will not hesitate to direct further measures to protect our people and our military personnel. For years, I've heard many of my Republican and Democratic friends say that China is on the rise and America's falling behind. They've got it backwards. I've been saying it for over 4 years, even when I wasn't president. America's rising. We have the best economy in the world. And since I've come to office, our GDP is up, our trade deficit with China is down to the lowest point in over a decade. And we're standing up against China's unfair economic practices. We're standing up for peace and stability across the Taiwan Straits. I've revitalized our partnership and alliance in the Pacific. India, Australia, Japan, South Korea, Pacific Islands. I've made sure that the most advanced American technologies can't be used in China, not allowing to trade them there. Frankly, for all this tough talk on China, it never occurred to my predecessor to do any of that. I want competition with China, not conflict. And we're in a stronger position to win the conflict of the 21st century against China than anyone else, for that matter, than any time as well. Here at home, I've signed over 400 bipartisan bills. There's more to pass my unity agenda. Strengthen penalties on fentanyl trafficking, You don't want to do that, huh? Pass bipartisan privacy legislation to protect our children online. Harness the promise of AI to protect us from peril. Ban AI voice impersonations and more. And keep our truly sacred obligation to train and equip those we send into harm's way and care for them and their families when they come home and when they don't. That's why the song Support and Help of Dennis and the VA, I signed the PACT Act. One of the most significant laws ever, helping millions of veterans exposed to toxins who now are battling more than 100 different cancers. Many of them don't come home, but we owe them and their families support. We owe it to ourselves to keep supporting our new health research agency called ARPA-H, and remind us that we can do big things like end cancer as we know it, and we will. Let me close with this. Yay! I know you don't want to hear any more, Lindsay, but I got to say a few more things. I know it may not look like it, but I've been around a while. When you get to be my age, certain things become clearer than ever. I know the American story. Again and again, I've seen the contest between competing forces in the battle for the soul of our nation, between those who want to pull America back to the past and those who want to move America into the future. My lifetime has taught me to embrace freedom and democracy, a future based on core values that have defined America: honesty, decency, dignity, equality, to respect everyone, to give everyone a fair shot, to give hate no safe harbor. Now, other people my age see it differently. The American story of resentment, revenge, and retribution, that's not me. I was born amid World War II, when America stood for the freedom of the world. I grew up in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and Claymont, Delaware, among working class people who built this country. I watched in horror as two of my heroes, like many of you did, Dr. King and Bobby Kennedy, were assassinated. And their legacies inspired me to pursue a career in service. I left the law firm, became a public defender because my city of Wilmington was the only city in America occupied by the National Guard after Dr. King was assassinated because of the riots. And I became a county councilman almost by accident. I got elected to the United States Senate when I had no intention of running at age 29. Then vice president of our first black president. Now president to the first women vice president. In my career, I've been told I was too young. By the way, they didn't let me on the Senate elevators for votes sometimes. Not a joke. And I've been told I'm too old. Whether young or old, I've always known what endures. I've known our North Star. The very idea of America is that we're all created equal, deserves to be treated equally throughout our lives. We've never fully lived up to that idea, but we've never walked away from it either. And I won't walk away from it now. I'm optimistic. I really am. I'm optimistic, Nancy. My fellow Americans, the issue facing our nation isn't how old we are, it's how old are our ideas. Hate, anger, revenge, retribution are the oldest of ideas. But you can't lead America with ancient ideas that only take us back. You lead America, the land of possibilities. You need a vision for the future and what can and should be done. Tonight you've heard mine. I see a future where defending democracy, you don't diminish it. I see a future where we restore the right to choose and protect our freedoms, not take them away. I see a future where the middle class finally has a fair shot and the wealthy have to pay their fair share in taxes. I see a future where we save the planet from the climate crisis and our country from gun violence. Above all, I see a future for all Americans. I see a country for all Americans. And I will always be president for all Americans because I believe in America. I believe in you, the American people. You're the reason we've never been more optimistic about our future than I am now. So let's build the future together. Let's remember who we are. We are the United States of America. And there is nothing beyond our capacity when we act together. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
This is Josh Boak with AP. What we just saw tonight from President Biden was an election year State of the Union. He started his speech by grounding it in history. He said, basically, we've been in this spot with World War II. We've been in this spot with the Civil War. And then he pivoted, as he did frequently throughout the night, to a person he simply called, quote, my predecessor. That individual was Donald Trump, the former US president and Biden's likely opponent in this year's presidential elections. He quoted Trump directly. He spoke about Trump's policies, whether that was on abortion or taxes, and he directly challenged his political rival. What was essential in what Biden did in this State of the Union was not necessarily him trying to extend an olive branch, but him drawing a dividing line between where he stands and where he says Republicans stand. So we saw him challenge the GOP on several fronts. He challenged them on taxes, drawing jeers, by saying that he would raise taxes on the wealthy and corporations while they would cut taxes by $2 trillion over 10 years. He went against them on Ukraine, saying that he would not walk away from America's responsibilities overseas, but some Republicans, including, quote, my predecessor, end quote, would. This was an example of Biden fine-tuning a message that voters are going to hear for months and months and months as we build to November. Not surprisingly, we saw an enthusiastic response from Democrats. It was almost as though at moments there was a call and response with them saying no when he would ask them a question, and Republicans in return largely sitting, refusing to clap. In some cases, there was yelling. We saw Marjorie Taylor Greene, the Georgia Congresswoman, put on a Donald Trump Make America Great Again red cap. And she at one point said that the president's son, Hunter, should pay his taxes. But beyond that, this was a GOP that didn't want to react to him, that didn't want to necessarily give him that moment unless they felt pushed. And Biden kept pushing. Why is that? Because about 2/3 of Republicans in some form have identified with Trump in that movement. That has become core to the identity of the party. So when Biden goes after Trump, he's going after Republicans. And not surprisingly, those Republicans are going to take it personally. We saw that on display in immigration. Biden talked about his bipartisan border security bill, one which has not come up for a vote on the House floor. He talked about the restrictions it would place on people who crossed the border without proper documentation. He spoke to that issue. And when he described the contents of that bill, Oklahoma Senator James Lankford listened. And Biden said that Trump had specifically called members of Congress and told them to not vote for the bill. And you could see Lankford say under his breath, "That's true." This was a dramatic moment because it got to the heart of the dysfunction in which politics has often superseded governance. In some ways, this is a challenge for Biden because he ran for office in 2020 saying that he could make government work, and yet we now see him in a moment of dysfunction. Republicans are going to have a chance to give their response. After Biden speaks, Alabama Senator Katie Britt is up, and she's going to drill down on several issues. First and foremost of that is inflation and the idea that families aren't making enough money to pay for housing, childcare, and the daily expenses. Biden tried in his speech to address that by saying that he would use additional taxes to pay for things like family leave and what he called affordable childcare. It remains unseen whether he can pull that off in a divided Congress. But the Republican solution thus far has been to say that had they been in charge, the country would not have gotten the spike in inflation that we saw under Biden. Biden is now talking with members as he leaves the chamber. This is his chance to show that after more than an hour of speaking, he's able to still stand, stay engaged, and stay focused. Again, aides said he was going to show energy, and we saw someone come in with some passion. We saw someone willing to improvise. We saw someone with some stumbles, like talking about stopping in Moscow to get prescription drugs. But on the whole, Biden decided that this was the moment to show that he was up for the task. The question, and what we don't know, is did voters watch the speech? Did they stay engaged? Were they as convinced by Biden's passion as other Democrats in that room, other Democrats in the White House felt they should be? That's going to be something that comes out in the weeks ahead. Right now, we see Biden talking with Florida Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz. He's getting a hug. This is a moment for him to take as close as it comes to a victory lap by people feeling happy about what he's done within his own party. But the uncertain thing comes from the people who aren't in that room, who when Biden talked about one of the most important issues facing the country, that's high housing costs, was he able to effectively communicate a policy in which he said he would give tax credits to first-time homebuyers and people who are selling their first home to move up? The idea behind that is that that would improve affordability and make people more willing to put their houses on the market, and in doing so, help to relieve some of the supply crunch. But that's a tough idea to communicate in very short sentences in a very long speech in which attention can easily go somewhere else. When talking about housing, the president also said that he would get rid of fees associated from the exchange of titles, and that could save home buyers $1,000 on the transaction. That's a lot of money. But right now, what is costing home buyers first and foremost is that mortgage rates are 6.88%. That's 6.88% on a 30-year mortgage. Rates when Biden took office were under 3%. That gap has created an affordability challenge on top of the supply issues. Biden seemed to suggest correctly that mortgage rates could fall as the Federal Reserve cuts its benchmark rate because it feels as though the economy faces less inflationary pressure. But so far, we have not seen the Fed take a serious move. And that sense of anxiety and unease is going to linger in the economy so long as the Fed feels it needs to keep rates high just in case inflation still poses a risk. One economist who I've talked to about this very issue said the difference in this year's election could be as simple as mortgage rates. If mortgage rates go from 6.88% up even higher or closer to 8%, that is going to be Trump's advantage. If they continue to fall and get closer to 6% or lower, that's going to help Biden. We're seeing right now more lawmakers cluster around the president. They're eager to talk to him. They're eager to hear what he has to say. Sitting down, looking at him right now is Illinois Senator Tammy Duckworth. Tammy Duckworth, of course, introduced a bill with IVF protections that was not able to get a vote on the House floor. Biden made IVF protections, that's in vitro fertilization, one of his key talking points in the State of the Union tonight. The idea that women should be able to have a child using a frozen embryo that would be implanted in them. That is considered risky after an Alabama court ruling, which suggested that those embryos are children and that fertility clinics could be held liable if those embryos were to perish. Again, Biden is really reveling in this moment. We're not seeing him move up and down the aisle. He is standing still and talking to as many people as possible. One of the women immediately to his right-hand side is Virginia Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger, who's now, I believe, running for governor in that state. You can also see just behind Biden, Washington State Congresswoman Jayapal, who leads one of the more liberal progressive wings within the House Democratic Caucus. And at times she has expressed frustration with the president as he has tried to tack more to the middle. The longer that Biden stays in the chamber, the more we're going to just see images of him posing, doing the kinds of things that voters don't often see him do when he's on the campaign trail. Often when Biden goes to a town, which he does so about once or maybe twice a week, he speaks. The cameras capture this speech, but because all the reporters and the entourage with him have to be ready for him to leave, we don't always get images of him greeting people, of him hugging people, of him talking to people. And so this is kind of a key moment of how we get to see the president interact, not just with lawmakers, but with everyday voters when he gets a chance to meet them. In fact, this moment would probably be perfect if he got a chance to have ice cream. Biden did bring up some of his favorite desserts during the speech, Snickers, when he was talking about shrinkflation and the idea that some companies are behind the increase in inflation because they're cutting the size of the products that they sell in grocery stores. So the Snickers is a little bit smaller than it was before, but the price remains the same. Curiously, if you were to look at the price of ice cream, and Biden loves ice cream, shrinkflation accounts for about 7% of the increase in ice cream prices since 2019. That's according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So even he's been hit by this a little bit. As Biden continues to talk, it's also worth noting House Speaker Mike Johnson's reaction to some of the speech. He stayed seated for most of the speech. There were a few arched eyebrows as Biden tried to attack the GOP record. Republicans see themselves as being at a critical moment in the history of the US. They see the country is on decline because of the kinds of policies that Biden has championed. They say the debt is unsustainable, the government bureaucracy is too vast, and if we cut down the size of government, if we reduce taxes, we would unlock growth. That doesn't necessarily mean the party is fully united, however. Biden tried to emphasize the divide within the GOP regarding America's role in the wider world. Within the House Republican caucus, there are some members, a decisive set, who say the U.S. should not be giving $60 billion in aid to Ukraine as it fights Russia after the 2022 invasion. They say that money should be spent at home, even though the White House has tried to explain the stakes of the situation by having Johnson recently meet with CIA Director Bill Burns. There's no evidence that Biden was able to successfully exploit those differences, but he wanted to highlight them. He said, just put my bills with foreign aid in them on the floor and they would pass in a bipartisan manner. Again, that message played well with Democrats, not so well with Republicans. Now, at the rate that Biden's exit is going, it's going to be a late night. We're talking about him getting back to the White House possibly past 11 o'clock. Most people don't know a lot about the president's daily schedule, but according to aides, he works out about 5 times a week with a personal trainer. And it's really about endurance at this stage for the president, about maximizing his opportunities. In terms of his fitness and health. Again, fitness and health has been a source of concern among many voters who look at his gait, who hear his voice, who even hear his cough and see how he moves and worry if he's still up for the job, because if he got a second term, he'd be leaving office at the age of 86. Coming up shortly will be Alabama Senator Katie Britt's response. Now, at the age of 42, Britt is basically half of Biden's age. She's able to present a youthful image for the GOP when she talks about families, when she talks about the future. And that's going to be an image that Republicans hope to be able to exploit. Now, part of that, which is very interesting, is that Republicans have been able to build that base with younger voters in parts of the South, but we haven't necessarily seen that nationwide. We basically have 2 dueling coalitions right now politically. Republicans tend to be older, they tend to be white, and they tend not to have college degrees. Democrats tend to be more diverse, they tend to be better educated, and they tend to be younger. However, if the Republican coalition is narrow demographically, it is deep. And if the Democratic coalition is broad, it can still be shallow in ways that policy differences can shatter any sense of unity. And we saw one big example of that tonight on the question of the Israel-Hamas war. We saw some members of Congress suggesting that Biden call for a ceasefire right now in Gaza, something that has not happened despite the administration's efforts due to resistance in the region. Some of those members see Biden as being too supportive of Israel, not willing to hold that U.S. ally accountable for its actions in Gaza. Others, though, within the party look at Hamas's attack on October 7th of last year, and in that brutality, see the necessity of Israel taking aggressive action to defend itself. For Biden, this has been a major split within the Democratic Party, one with possible repercussions in November. As Britt speaks, she'll have the opportunity to show, from the GOP perspective, where they differ with Democrats, to try to counteract what Biden said. But after Biden's long speech, she's got to be able to reach Americans fast and grab their attention in hopes of getting it right. And if anyone knows the pressure that she faces, it's Biden, who again had to deliver the Democratic response in 1983 when Ronald Reagan was president. By the way, in tonight's State of the Union, Biden specifically cited Reagan for standing up to what was then the Soviet Union, saying to Mikhail Gorbachev, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. He was, of course, referring to the infamous Berlin Wall, which did come down with the collapse of the Soviet Union. We're expecting the Republican response shortly. Again, this is really going to be their chance to say, here's where we stand and here's what we believe.
Good evening, America. My name is Katie Britt, and I have the honor of serving the people of the great state of Alabama in the United States Senate. However, that's not the job that matters most. I am a proud wife and mom of 2 school-aged kids. My daughter Bennett and my son Ridgway are why I ran for the Senate. I'm worried about their future and the future of children in every corner of our nation. And that's why I invited you into our home tonight. Like so many families across America, my husband Wesley and I just watched President Biden's State of the Union address from our living room. And what we saw was the performance of a permanent politician who has actually been in office for longer than I've been alive. One thing was quite clear, though. President Biden just doesn't get it. He's out of touch. Under his administration, families are worse off, our communities are less safe, and our country is less secure. I just wish he understood what real families are facing around kitchen tables just like this one. You know, this is where our family has tough conversations. It's where we make hard decisions. It's where we share the good, the bad, and the ugly of our days. It's where we laugh together, and it's where we hold each other's hands and pray for God's guidance. And many nights, to be honest, it's where Wesley and I worry. I know we're not alone. And so tonight, the American family needs to have a tough conversation, because the truth is, we're all worried about the future of our nation. The country we know and love seems to be slipping away, and it feels like the next generation will have fewer opportunities and less freedoms than we did. I worry my own children may not even get a shot at living their American dreams. My American dream allowed me, the daughter of 2 small business owners from rural Enterprise, Alabama, to be elected to the United States Senate at the age of 40. Growing up, sweeping the floor at my dad's hardware store and cleaning the bathroom at my mom's dance studio, I never could have imagined what my story would entail. To think about what the American dream can do across just one generation, in just one lifetime, it's truly breathtaking. But right now, the American dream has turned into a nightmare for so many families. The true, unvarnished state of our union begins and ends with this: our families are hurting. Our country can do better. And you don't have to look any further than the crisis at our southern border to see it. President Biden inherited the most secure border of all time. But minutes after taking office, he suspended all deportations, he halted construction of the border wall, and he announced a plan to give amnesty to millions. We know that President Biden didn't just create this border crisis, he invited it with 94 executive actions in his first 100 days. When I took office, I took a different approach. I traveled to the Del Rio sector of Texas. That's where I spoke to a woman who shared her story with me. She had been sex trafficked by the cartels starting at the age of 12. She told me not just that she was raped every day, but how many times a day she was raped. The cartels put her on a mattress in a shoebox of a room, and they sent men through that door over and over again for hours and hours on end. We wouldn't be okay with this happening in a third world country. This is the United States of America, and it is past time, in my opinion, that we start acting like it. President Biden's border policies are a disgrace. This crisis is despicable. And the truth is, it is almost entirely preventable. From fentanyl poisonings to horrific murders, there are empty chairs tonight at kitchen tables just like this one because of President Biden's senseless border policies. Just think about Laken Riley. In my neighboring state of Georgia, this beautiful 22-year-old nursing student went out on a jog one morning, but she never got the opportunity to return home. She was brutally murdered by one of the millions of illegal border crossers President Biden chose to release into our homeland. Y'all, as a mom, I can't quit thinking about this. I mean, this could have been my daughter. This could have been yours. And tonight, President Biden finally said her name. But he refused to take responsibility for his own actions. Mr. President, enough is enough. Innocent Americans are dying, and you only have yourself to blame. Fulfill your oath of office, reverse your policies, end this crisis, and stop the suffering. Sadly, we know that President Biden's failures don't stop there. His reckless spending dug our economy into a hole and sent the cost of living through the roof. We have the worst inflation in 40 years and the highest credit card debt in our nation's history. Let that sink in. Hardworking families are struggling to make ends meet today. And with soaring mortgage rates and sky-high childcare costs, they're also struggling to how to plan for tomorrow. The American people are scraping by, while President Biden proudly proclaims that Bidenomics is working. Goodness, y'all, bless his heart, we know better. I'll never forget stopping at a gas station in Chilton County one evening. The gentleman working the counter told me that after retiring, he had to pick up a job in his 70s so that he didn't have to choose between going hungry or going without his medication. He said, I did everything right. I did everything I was told to do. I worked hard, I saved, I was responsible. He's not alone. I hear similar concerns from fellow parents, whether I am walking with my friends or whether I'm at my kids' games. But let's be honest, it's been a minute since Joe Biden pumped gas, ran a carpool, or even pushed a grocery cart. Meanwhile, the rest of us see our dollar and we know it doesn't go as far. We see it every day. And despite what he tells you, our communities are not safer. For years, the left has coddled criminals and defunded the police, all while letting repeat offenders walk free. The result is tragic, but foreseeable. From our small towns to America's most iconic city streets, life is getting more and more dangerous. And unfortunately, President Biden's weakness isn't just hurting families here at home. He is making us a punchline on the world stage. Look, where I'm from, your word is your bond. But for 3 years, the president has demonstrated that America's word doesn't mean what it used to. From abandoning our allies in his disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan to desperately pushing another dangerous deal with Iran, President Biden has failed. We've become a nation in retreat, and the enemies of freedom, they see an opportunity. Putin's brutal aggression in Europe has put our allies on the brink. Iran's terrorist proxies have slaughtered Israeli, Jews, and American citizens. They've targeted commercial shipping, and they've attacked our troops nearly 200 times since October, killing 3 US soldiers and 2 Navy SEALs. Meanwhile, the Chinese Communist Party is undercutting America's workers. China is buying up our farmland, spying on our military installations, and spreading propaganda through the likes of TikTok. You see, the CCP knows that if it conquers the minds of our next generation, it conquers America. And what does President Biden do? Well, he bans TikTok for government employees, but creates an account for his own campaign. Y'all, you can't make this stuff up. Look, we all recall when presidents faced national security threats with strength and resolve. That seems like ancient history. Right now, our commander-in-chief is not in command. The free world deserves better than a dithering and diminished leader. America deserves leaders who recognize that secure borders, stable prices, safe streets, and a strong defense are actually the cornerstones of a great nation. Just ask yourself, are you better off now than you were 3 years ago? There's no doubt we're at a crossroads, and it doesn't have to be this way. We all feel it. But here's the good news. We, the people, are still in the driver's seat. We get to decide whether our future will grow brighter or whether we'll settle for an America in decline. Well, I know which choice our children deserve, and I know the choice the Republican Party is fighting for. We are the party of hard-working parents and families, And we want to give you and your children the opportunities to thrive. And we want families to grow. It's why we strongly support continued nationwide access to in vitro fertilization. We want to help loving moms and dads bring precious life into this world. Wesley and I believe there is no greater blessing in life than our children. And that's why tonight, I want to make a direct appeal to the parents out there, and in particular to my fellow moms, many of whom I know will be up tossing and turning at 2 a.m., wondering how you're going to be in 3 places at once and then somehow still get dinner on the table. First of all, we see you, we hear you, and we stand with you. I know you're frustrated. I know you're probably disgusted by most of what you see going on in Washington, and I'll be really honest with you, you're not wrong for feeling that way. Look, I get it. The task in front of us isn't an easy one, but I can promise you one thing. It is worth it. So I am asking you, for the sake of your kids and your grandkids, get into the arena. Every generation has been called to do hard things. American greatness rests in the fact that we always answer that call. It's who we are. Never forget, we are steeped in the blood of patriots who overthrew the most powerful empire in the world. We walk in the footsteps of pioneers who tamed the wild. We now carry forward the same flame of freedom as the liberators of an oppressed Europe. We continue to draw courage from those who bent the moral arc of the universe. And when we gaze upon the heavens, never forget that our DNA contains the same ingenuity that put man on the moon. America has been tested before, and every single time we've emerged unbowed and unbroken. Our history has been written with the grit of men and women who got knocked down. But we know their stories because they did not stay down. We are here because they stood back up. So now it's our turn, our moment to stand up and prove ourselves worthy of protecting the American dream. Together, we can reawaken the heroic spirit of a great nation. Because America, we don't just have a rendezvous with destiny. We take destiny's hand and we lead it. Our future starts around kitchen tables just like this, with moms and dads just like you. And you are why I believe with every fiber of my being that despite the current state of our union, our best days are still ahead. May God bless you, and may God continue to bless these United States of America.
That was Alabama Senator Katie Britt giving the Republican response to the State of the Union. What you saw from Senator Britt was a chance to say that the American dream has become a nightmare. She listed problems like inflation, the chaos at the border, crime in cities, and said these are the faults of President Biden. She then said that President Biden has not been an effective international leader, whether that was because Russia invaded Ukraine or whether the United States decided to start negotiating with Iran. What is being shaped up here, most importantly, are two conflicting visions. One is Biden's, which says the country is getting better and stronger under him. The other is the Republican message that America is getting weaker, that it's in a period of decay. And the only way to stop that is by putting a Republican in office. Over the next several months, this will be the choice that voters have to make. That's it for me, Josh Boak with AP. Thank you for watching our coverage of the State of the Union and the Republican response.
Honey, were you